RevOps AF, the only podcast for people who are RevOps AF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
All right, RevOps AF listeners, quick question. How many times have you been asked to define your TAM, SAM, SOM, redesign territories, or do white space analysis without the data you actually need to do it right? That's exactly why today's episode is brought to you by HG Insights, the platform RevOps teams rely on to power go-to-market strategy with AI-powered revenue growth intelligence. HG Insights gives you the best-in-class stuff you can't get anywhere else. Technographics tell you who's using what technology across your ICP. Install data tells you which accounts are using competitors you can displace. Spend intelligence tells you who's investing in your category and how quickly. Market context tells you which accounts are growing, contracting, or primed for outreach. And TAM and segmentation data that's actually defensible with your CRO and finance. Imagine building territories with confidence. Imagine surfacing the highest value accounts before sales even ask. Imagine going into planning with facts, not vibes. If RevOps is the engine of go-to-market, HG Insights is the fuel that makes it run smarter, faster, and with fewer "let me get back to you" moments. To learn more, head over to hginsights.com. That's hginsights.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of RevOps AF, the podcast where we sit down with people who are RevOps AF to talk all about things that are RevOps AF. And today we are sitting down with Ed King, the CEO and founder of Openprise. Openprise is an AI and data orchestration platform, and Ed has been the founder for the last several years, and so he has had a front row seat to all things AI, all things data. And today we are going to be talking about the evolution of the revenue operations role and really what it takes to be a successful revenue operator over the next year, 5 years, 10 years. We're going to do a little bit of predicting the future, I think. But Ed has a pretty incredible background, and he's going to kind of lay this all out for us perfectly, right, Ed? And it's going to be a bit of a crystal ball sort of session. But welcome, my friend. Thank you for being here. Why don't we first, if you want, add anything to that personal and professional introduction before we get into the topic of the day?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. I'm Ed King, founder and CEO for Openprise. Like Matt said, we are an AI and data orchestration platform. So essentially, we help you collect all the data, make them make them really good quality, help you automate your processes, and enable all your go-to-market motions and users.
Love it. All right. So I guess I mentioned the topic of the day, Ed, and I guess my first question for you, I think we've all seen some of the studies by MIT and others about AI initiatives and projects that have stalled, that have failed. And so you have tons of incredible customers. You've had plenty of conversations with some really incredible companies. And so my first question for you is, why are so many AI projects and AI initiatives stuck or seemingly stuck in this kind of pilot mode where we're not able to really take things to the next level and I think realize or see the success that we all expect or want to see? Why are we stuck right now when it comes to AI?
Yeah, there's actually multiple reasons for that, and the security hallucination is a big part of it. But so a little bit of context, right? We mostly sell to medium to large enterprise. So our view is a little skewed towards that direction. So one of the big things we're seeing is that if you just look at when people say they're doing AI projects, right? What exactly are those projects? And this is our observation, our data point, but this is also actually reinforced by Open Data's own published study. So right now, about 65% of what's AI projects is actually centered around two areas. One is, of course, content generation, right? The other one is actually essentially replacing search. So it's a lot of web crawling for data to help, for example, do personalization and all that. So that's 65%, the overall AI use case. And then beyond that, a little more advanced beyond that, it's about 30% is people use it for like analytics, using it for recommendation, planning. And that usually requires now a little bit more integration to your backend infrastructure. Oftentimes we see that even there, those systems, the way they get the data is actually not through integration, but user actually go download the data and upload them into AI, right? Now, the last 5% is actually where the agents is actually doing something, right? This means actually calling out to your existing infrastructure. Now, that 5% has what we found is pretty much exclusively doing things against what we would call low-risk systems. These are like engagement platforms. So we're talking about stuff like SalesOps, outreach type of platforms, social media. We haven't seen a single instance where the agent is allowed to actually update core system record like CRMs, marketing automation platform. Not a single one, right? And that's one of the big obstacles why these AI projects are essentially stuck at the demo and pilot phase, because they're not actually allowed to integrate to essentially all the core infrastructure systems. And on a few instances where the integration does happen, we're seeing IT is actually stepping in and creating kind of an intermediate layer using traditional middleware. And for any ops folks will tell you that's a slippery slope to go down.
Yeah, scary, slippery slope, scary term for sure, but definitely seems like a last mile sort of problem. And actually, before we get into the next question I have for you is, what's the reason why IT isn't allowing like direct connection to these systems? Is it the fact that they're so new that there's just a lot of uncertainty or unknowns around what it would do or what it would mean? Or is it that there's just way too much risk because there's missing pieces elsewhere? What are you hearing? What are you seeing on why there's not like more companies out there that are directly connecting things?
Yeah, the primary reason is really around security and reliability, right? And the AI technology we have today, which is large language model based, hallucination, unfortunately, it is a feature. It's not a bug. It's hallucination hasn't improved for the last 5 years. And in some academic study actually shows it's actually gradually getting worse, right? So because of that, it does generate the unpredictability, let alone potentially doing really damaging stuff. We all heard the horror story that I forgot which company it was, their AI deleted their entire database in 9 minutes, right? So even without the security prompt injection concerns, just the fact that the AI is not reliable, right? It is a probabilistic technology, right? So we tell people that when it comes to execution, people only want deterministic execution. Nobody wants probabilistic execution. When you want something done, you want it done. It's not, maybe you'll get it done. Maybe you'll get it done properly. That's a question nobody ever asked for, right? So that's really the primary reason, is that it's just the lack of consistency, predictability, and when you're layering on security concerns on top of that, it is very legitimate reason why IT and InfoSec is saying no, right? In fact, folks that know me, my background is actually in security. And I tell people that today, if you are a chief information security officer and you allow agents to connect to your backend system, you probably should be fired.
Yeah, there you have it. All right, so I think you got a lot of those and other folks now that are probably, if they're listening, maybe running to make sure that none of these agents have actual direct connections because they all want to keep their jobs. But you laid out a good case. It all makes sense. So if agents can't touch core systems directly, then there's obviously this missing layer, this missing piece. So let's say that a company does want AI agents to actually update things, right? Update Salesforce or HubSpot or route leads or execute on operational workflows. You just laid out the case for why IT or security teams wouldn't be comfortable giving agents direct access to those systems. So what does the control layer look like then? And what should it look like also when it comes to enterprise infrastructure?
Exactly. So to solve this, we like to call this AI's last mile problem, right? what's really missing is that you need this control layer that sits between the AI agents and the backend infrastructure. So what exactly does this control layer do, right? It's really, if you look at the kind of high-level functionality, it really brings down to three big major areas. The first one is security, identity management, specifically authentication, all that. I can talk about that all day, but that's not a topic for this audience. And the second and third one. Second one is actually how do you prepare data for the agents to use? And we can talk about that next. And the third one is how do you actually create essentially tools that the agent can use to actually do stuff, right? Because it can't directly call the backend API, it needs an intermediate. So it's really, for this audience, it's really about two parts. The control layer gives you the data that's ready for agent to use. Then they also provide tools that agent can call to actually transact against the backend systems.
So is this intermediate layer, again, I guess two things came up as you were speaking. So one, it was like, okay, is this something you should buy or build if you're a company? And then who should own this? Because I think about revenue operations typically owning go-to-market technology, to things like their CRM, other tooling that's being used. But is this something that RevOps then should own? Is this something that IT should own? Maybe there's a, I don't know, secret third option that's correct, or maybe you're going to say it's both or all of the above. I'm not sure. But how would you answer those two questions on build versus buy, and then who should the ultimate owner be?
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, as everything else, you can build or buy, right? It depends on which companies, which already have what does your team look like, in some cases, what the power dynamic is between the business and IT. Now, I'm a firm believer that ops has to own this layer, right? For the reason that a lot of the especially on the data and transaction part, really only the ops understand how the business needs to operate. IT would just never be able to understand that deeply enough to build the right set of tools. And maybe this is a good gateway to just kind of also dig in a little bit about those two components that I talked about, right? When we say build a data set and build a tool, let's just get a little bit more concrete about what exactly are we talking about, right? So the first one, for example, is this whole idea of just like we have to make data easy to use for human beings, we actually have to make data easy to use for AI, right? And for all kinds of reasons. And this is probably best to talk about using an example. And this is funny, when I give this example, folks that don't work with CRM data finds this example just ludicrous. But for us who work with CRM data all day long, we know this is true, right? I ask people, hey, how many people do you think in your company that can answer the question that who are my customers for the last 12 months? There's usually less than a handful of people that can answer that question properly. Oh, by the way, they need to go work on it for probably at least a day to answer that question, right? Yeah. And for folks, we are familiar with go-to-market data. We know your CRM data schema is usually to a degree that, again, it was never designed to answer that question easily. So with all kind of customization, custom field, custom objects, all the data business logic you baked in, yeah, you have to layer in logic after logic to really just even answer what seems like a simple, stupid question, right? Who are my customers in the last 12 months, right?
Yeah, because even as you mentioned that, it's like, is my customer, is it a company? Is it a person? What if they haven't paid me in a little bit? Then I have duplicates in my account. Is it a series of people, right? Is it a buying committee? There's so many, and you're right. If we ask, for example, my wife is a lawyer, if asked her like that question, she would definitely think it was insane that you wouldn't have an immediate answer to that, right?
For example, one of our customers who runs data centers, they don't use the account object in Salesforce properly, right? They use it almost like some kind of container, and they have actually a custom child account object that really looks more like your regular people's account object, right? And so now to say, hey, agents, here's my Salesforce schema, go figure it out, right? What is the chance that you can figure that out properly when the people who created and populated the data have to scratch their head for a day to figure out what is the proper, how to come up with that list? So if you just expose the raw data to agents, the chances are it can figure out reliably is almost zero for a large complex enterprise customer. And two is that even if you can figure out, to have it repeatedly try to do this over and over again, every time it has to ask a question, just imagine how many tokens it's burning to do this, and also how slow this is going to be, right? So this is an example where there's no reason why AI needs to do this particular task, try to figure out who in the world my customers are. Instead, much easier, efficient, reliable way to do this is that ops team literally just build out a data set called customers, right? Simple on the table, maybe has 20 fields in it, and just present that to the AI agent to say, if you ever want to query who customers are, we have a data set called customer, easy peasy, just go look there. Oh, by the way, you don't even need to know what my backend looks like. You don't need to know if I'm a Salesforce shop, Dynamics shop. You don't need to know how I bastardize my data schema, right? Where all the 6 different custom fields are that 2 weeks later, I don't even remember what those fields are, right? So, and again, you can do this quickly, efficiently, while not burning a ton of token, right? So this idea of you need to actually prepare almost like a data catalog to present to AI agents so it can actually do its job effectively. That's the first item that needs to be in that control layer. It's the data catalog you actually prep and present so AI can actually do its job, right? The second component is now great. Now AI has access to the data it needs efficiently. It can do the analysis, it can make decisions. Great. Next, it needs to now write back to the systems, right? Let's say you're eventing, use Claude to orchestrate some kind of pre-event prospecting motion. So great, it has data, it has access to all those data. It decides what list to build. It decides how to personalize, how to outreach. Then now it has to set up the campaigns in your CRM. It needs to populate who's in the campaign, what's the status, who's the hand raiser, who responded. So now, because again, if IT says you're not going to call my Salesforce API directly, so what you want to do here is actually create a set of tools, right? For example, there may be a tool called Create Campaign, another tool for Update Campaign Status. So all the AI agent has to do is that, okay, if I need to update campaigns in the CRM, use this particular tool, right? So the tool structure around what you get asked them to do and has very predictable output. And in the backend, it can enforce all kind of data logic, workflow, your funnel transition, whatever you need to enforce to make sure the data is actually updated properly, even enforce stuff like campaign naming convention, right? And so all that stuff, remember, any of this stuff actually requires no intelligence, right? So all the stuff that requires no intelligence, you really don't want to waste time, bandwidth, and the cost and effort to have AI do it and also get worse results at the same time. So imagine a set of these tools, which generally will come in the form of MCP servers, right? That's actually a custom MCP server you have to be able to create. That include custom APIs, including potentially CLIs as well, command line interfaces. But it's all the key here is that can you take all your backend processes, your governance process, your onboarding protocols, create these kind of custom tools, right? APIs, MCPs, and expose that to the agents as a set of tools. So collectively, you can think about it's really you're creating like a toolbox or a catalog of data sets and tools that completely abstract away what your backend looks like, right? And make things very simple. And so the agent can now just use this toolbox. So you can install all these tools into your end user's agent environment. Doesn't matter what they use really. They can use Cloud, they can use Agentforce, whatever they want. So your business user end up now doing a lot of this kind of orchestration using AI that traditionally apps have to build out workflows for them. But instead now you say, hey, I'm just going to give you a bunch of tools. You can go ahead and use the agents to orchestrate and automate whatever you want to do.
Yeah. How do you think about what items should go in the data catalog that you ultimately need to create? Because I'm guessing that there's probably a lot of folks out there right now listening or most likely do not have something like this set up. So there's always a question of, okay, where do I start? Is it based on use cases, like problems that you're looking to solve? Is it based on things that you're trying to build with AI right now, where maybe you're running into problems because you don't have this kind of middle layer, and that's really what you need? Like, how should people think about that, the items that should go in this data catalog?
Yeah, this is why I said ops has to own this, right? Because there's two big things that has to happen. One, of course, you have to decide what technology platform you're going to do this on, right? So, and again, this is now something that you definitely shouldn't go down, use a hodgepodge of different technologies. Again, makes things difficult for you. It can also, at the same time, makes things difficult for the agents. So you do want to pick some kind of orchestration platform that ideally ops can use yourself, so it's no code. So it's not just taking the relying on IT to build this out of middleware. So there's that technology decision ops needs to kind of take ownership of. Outside of technology, that really goes to the crux of your question. Like, what should be in that catalog? What should be in that toolbox? This is where that system design thinking has to come in, right? This is where ops really adds its value in terms of as the architect of the modern go-to-market stack with agent in it. So this is where you have to understand what are some of the go-to-market motions I have to enable. How are my users using agents? What are use cases? What's the commonality across those use cases, right? What you don't want to do is create a bunch of data sets and tools that are only useful to, say, one group of users, right? Then you have to create just variation after variation for every single other set of use cases, another business set of users. You want to find the commonality among the data needs as well as the tool needs to say, hey, if I can provide this set of standard tools, the agents should be able to do whatever the use case it is. Like, for example, whether they're trying to orchestrate, whether it's SDR team trying to orchestrate prospecting motion, whether it's eventing is trying to drive traffic to the events, or somebody's using it to drive content syndication, try to drive ad campaigns. There's a certain level of commonality. So go back to our example, right? So yeah, so maybe, for example, instead of creating a data set specifically for events, you have data sets like customers, my ABM accounts, right? Or my white space accounts. But whatever those kind of common components are, so it really goes back to this ability to how can you maximize the scalability and reusability of those tools, right? So what you want to end up with is, say, whether it's like 22, 30 data sets, and that gives you all the building blocks that pretty much most of your agent use cases will have the sufficient ability to get all the data they need to do this work, and also have the ability to update your backend systems for whatever they do. And that is where a lot of the traditional kind of system design practice comes in. This is where ops, that's one of the big part of value ops has to bring to the table, right? To be able to figure out what the business needs, what the infrastructure needs, and what is the most efficient and scalable middle tier. What goes in that toolbox, that takes a lot of experience and knowledge and skill set.
Yeah, and it makes sense why ops should be the owner of that. We just had our RevOps AF conference in London. Month before, we had our RevOps AF conference in San Francisco, where you all were there as a supporter and a sponsor. And at least at our London event, which we just got done with, one of our speakers was talking about different periods of innovation and how the closer you can get innovation into the hands of the builders, the doers, right? The people who are there on the front lines, the more valuable that is. And so if we think about, and this is not to say that IT is not valuable, right? They're friends. They have tons of value. They're very useful, right? But they aren't the ones on the front lines, right? And ops is in this really unique position where they're the bridge of both, right? They're there supporting these teams of sales, of marketing, post sales. Like they're in on customer conversations. They've listened to them. They've listened to the sales calls. They know all the things, and they have this kind of technical acumen as well. And so having this middle layer owned with them is really powerful, and how I think you can produce a whole lot of value. But it also looks different than maybe where things have been in the past, or at least hearing a lot of the things that you're saying around this data catalog and kind of this toolbox that you're creating. It definitely seems like it's a new era of revenue operations. I think about historically building workflows and automations. You are typically connecting directly to the tools that you need. Things are deterministic. You're able to get 80% of the way there, not perfect, right? But like, you're like this is good enough. And it's a very different approach than what you're describing. And so what skills, responsibilities, priorities should RevOps leaders then be developing today in order to be successful in this agent-driven future? What are some things that folks can and should be doing right now in order to best prepare themselves for the world that you're describing?
Yeah, and this is where I think a complete mindset change has to happen, right? And so instead of thinking in terms of point solutions, point-to-point integrations, you really have to start thinking about infrastructure. You have to think about capability as a service, right? Now, IT guys went through this transformation probably 20 plus 30 years ago, right? Where you went from all just bunch of system individually, it went through this for folks, like me, probably familiar with a term called service-oriented architecture, right? This whole idea of that you have to turn the common capability into standardized services, right? The different systems can consume. In a lot of ways, I sometimes tell people that what this way is thinking about building tools and data sets for the agents is essentially service-oriented architecture for AI, right? So what this really requires you to do for example, when that happened in IT, there's this new role that emerged in IT called enterprise architects, right? These are the people that don't think about the individual applications. They think about the whole system. They think about building, in IT we call it like enterprise service bus. What is that infrastructure that's going to allow all these technology endpoints to plug in and have the infrastructure provide all the services that those consumers need? How do you do this in a way that's the most scalable, right, and secure? So that is, I think, the most successful ask people that's going to set themselves up to kind of be the in demand for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, right? It's the one that's going to successfully transition themselves away from, okay, I'm an expert in product 1, product 2, product 3. You probably met these folks. There's a lot of folks out there. I have a reference stack of technologies, right? I always use these 5 vendors. They work well. Everywhere they go, they try to basically implement that stack. That won't work anymore in the agent world, right? You really have to be able to come in and say, okay, it's my job to understand what the business needs. It's my job to understand what infrastructure that we have. And by the way, those infrastructure are not going anywhere anytime soon. You're stuck with them, right? How do I look at this as a system to say, how can I take what I have in the backend, create these scalable services, tools, data that my consumer layer, the apps, the people, the agent needs. So it's really this system design kind of mindset. Now, unfortunately, there's no like a school you can go to for this kind of stuff. It is something that you just have to kind of learn from your peers or come to podcasts and community events to learn from people who have kind of gone down that path, or just take your enterprise architect buddies from IT out to coffee every other week. But it's really kind of making that transition I'm going to transition from thinking about apps to thinking about systems, thinking about system architecture.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of the top operators, I know the people that we see through RevOps Co-op are doing that. They're treating revenue operations like a product that they're building, that they're managing, that they're delivering to their end users, right? People who work in sales, marketing, AI agents as well. Users are not just people anymore. And yeah, it's one of those things where I wish it was easy enough to say, oh yeah, here's the playbook. Here's literally follow these steps, right? And this is how you get from point A to point B. But it's just not that easy. It's hard, but it's hard because it's valuable. And if you're able to do it.
Unfortunately, the workflows are going to get a little bit more technical as well, right? It's no longer just, hey, I will go configure this tool, configure that connector. It's going to be, how can you create a workflow? How can you create a custom API? How can you create a custom NCP, right? Those are a bit more technical than just going to an app and says, let me activate this connection and map these fields. So yes, so outside of kind of try to adopt a more system architect mindset, learn system design skills, you also unfortunately have to get a little bit more technical as well. However, the good news is that if you have the right kind of no-code type of platform, that can be overcome without you have to go spend the next 6 months taking programming classes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, I have one more question for you. This is some predict the future crystal ball sort of question. And actually, I'll take two different angles on this. So 5 years from now, if we're sitting down in 2031, the first part of this question, what percentage of today's RevOps work do you think will still be humans building workflows versus humans building capabilities for agents?
Yeah, so really, I think kind of building on what we just talked about, as agents started to kind of take over more and more the end user functionality, right? So the end users are, in fact, I think increasingly it may be started to become a little blurry between who's a human and who's an agent, right? And it's so really, I think the app's future is about capabilities. It's about enterprise capability. It's all about the ops team delivering capabilities that can be leveraged by human agents or apps. And given how quickly or slowly things move in a large enterprise, where even within the next 5 to 10 years, you're still going to have a pretty messy environment where all three of those exist, right? Human agents and just simple apps. Is how do you deliver capabilities in a way that you can do it in a way that's scalable? And so that means, can you do that with as few pieces of technology as you can, right? Because as we know that if we keep on going the path of just building complex go-to-market stacks, as the use cases gets more complex, the user gets more complex, you're just going to head into a wall of complexity. So not only you have to start thinking about system architecture, delivery capabilities, but also at the same time, how do I do this with as few technologies as possible?
Yeah. And I was thinking about the data catalog stuff that you mentioned before, and even the example of customers, right? Being able to identify easily what customers are. Mm-hmm. Something like that is not just valuable for AI and agents, but how great would it be for your human team members to be able to have something simple to look at, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, like how many customers do we have? Where is our customer list, right? So a lot of these things that require us to simplify and make things easier for AI, they're also going to make the lives of humans better, because it would be so much better if you were to ask me that question, and instead of being like, you got to go to Salesforce, and you got to take this one report, but you got to filter it by this thing, and then you just have to know to exclude like the ones that say test in parentheses, because that's where I test in production. And then if it says like SAP, like you got to know like that's going to show up like 5 times because of all the child accounts, but like we really only count it once. Like instead of saying that, how great would it be to be like, oh, just go here. Like here's our customer list, right? That stuff will just be a lot easier, right? So a lot of these things that we talk about building for the AI future, like you said, humans are still involved in that, and hopefully a lot of this stuff will make our human lives easier as well as our AI friends' lives easier.
You remind me of an important point I forgot in the last question. I think also we've seen ops grow the last decade, right? Marketing, sales, RevOps. Now we're starting seeing CSOps, right? So a lot of these core capabilities, go back to our example here, right? Be able to just easily say, who are our customers? Go-to-market are not the only people who cares about this. finance cares about it as well.
Yeah.
Right. Your operation team cares about it as well. Your field team does delivery expect that, want to have that too. So I do think ops is also continuing to grow across the enterprise. You have HR ops, finance ops, every ops you can imagine. And a lot of the infrastructure they need, the data they need, it's not just you have to seek that scalability and commonality across the go-to-market functions. I think the ops team that's going to be really successful are the ones that are capable to design these toolboxes and data sets. So what they deliver is no longer just go-to-market capability, it's literally enterprise-wide capabilities, right? So you can tell finance, oh, you want to know who the customer is? Here.
Yeah. I know. And something so simple yet so valuable, right?
Exactly.
But often those are the hardest things to solve. But again, I think that's why ops is uniquely positioned to be able to do that and do it well.
Absolutely.
So, all right, Ed, that's all I got for you, my friend. So thank you very much for dropping some knowledge on us today. I really appreciate it. But with that, I will let you run. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's been a blast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOps AF, y'all.